Okay, and we're at the top of the hour, so let's get started. This is the mini webinar series by Chango. We call it the mini webinar series on purpose because it's our goal to get you on and off this call in under 30 minutes. We recognize your time is valuable, and so we condense the message down in order for you to get what you need in the shortest period of time possible. We are always available to have follow-up conversations with you, whether you be an existing client or not, and my contact details are on the front slide, which you should now be seeing. I'd like to put out a special welcome as well. I know some of our agency and brand partners are currently watching and listening to this presentation in their conference rooms along with some representatives from the Chango Client Services team, and so welcome to you. There is actually a follow-up webinar to this coming up in a few weeks available on the Chango website that is a private webinar for existing clients as part of our learning series, and so if you'd like any more information about that, do please feel free to reach out to your sales or client services contact who will be happy to put you in touch with that information. Quick introduction to myself first of all. My name is Dax. I'm the Chief Revenue and Strategy Officer and member of the founding team here at Chango. We are today going to first of all touch on, get the interface to work. We're going to first of all touch on the basics, and we're going to cover off what exactly is FBX, or the Facebook exchange, and we're also going to talk a little bit about, first of all, the difference between the Facebook exchange and Facebook marketplace ads, because that seems to be one of the most common questions that is coming up right now. Second, we're going to talk about this concept of data. As we're going to learn in the first part, data is critical to Facebook exchange targeting, and you need to be bringing your own data into the mix. So we're going to talk a little bit about what first-party data you have access to that can be used in FBX, and then we're going to talk about how Chango utilizes search data in order to help you understand who to target and at what price within the Facebook exchange. Third, we like to give you some takeaway tips that give you immediate benefit, and then we're going to wrap up with your questions and answers. And for those of you that have just joined in the last few seconds, you can use the chat interface that's provided, hopefully on your screen, to either ask us questions as we go through the presentation or to give us any feedback. And at the end of the presentation, I will start to run through those questions. I'm going to go through in a period of time to have chance to answer some of your questions within the 30 minutes, but we are going to keep the webinar running for as long as it takes to address all of your questions, and so if you have more than 30 minutes to stay on the phone, then please feel free to do so, and we can have a dialogue that way. I do have some feedback from some attendees right now that they're saying they're not hearing the presentation. For those of you that might be having hearing difficulties, then we'll reach out to you through the chat function. Obviously, those of you who can't hear us at all have no idea what I'm saying, and so we will deal with them. Okay, so let's give you a quick introduction first of all to Chango. Many of you will know us for our full-service media capabilities. We cover the two main needs that marketers have, and that is prospecting for brand new customers and converting existing customers or site visitors. When we talk about prospecting, what we're best known for is this concept of search retargeting. Unlike the idea of traditional retargeting or site retargeting, we're not interested in finding those people again who've already been to your site. Instead, what we're interested in is finding those people who have never visited your site, but who have searched on Google, Yahoo, or Bing for terms that are relevant to your business. We also use FBX advertising, as you will see, for prospecting for new customers, and we have various ways in which we can exclude your existing customers and site visitors to make that even more efficient. Search retargeting is typically a direct response type of buy, and it is highly effective because it is marrying that scale of display with the intent of search data. The second thing that we're known for under our media solutions is our conversion products, and this is more akin to what you'd be familiar with traditional retargeting. We actually refer to this as programmatic site retargeting, and I'll come back and explain what we mean by programmatic shortly and give you some more information. Many of you on the call won't know us for some of our technology solutions that we've recently been exposing to the marketplace. we're actually the platform of choice for many publishers, advertisers, and agencies for all their real-time buying. You can find out more information on our site, and of course you can reach out and we can have a conversation around that. So that's enough about Chango. Let's jump in and talk immediately about the Facebook Exchange. First of all, the Facebook Exchange is of interest to us all because of the utter scale that Facebook brings to the mix. Using Facebook's numbers, then we're at over a billion registered users, and they're estimating that they're going to be 25% of real-time bidded impressions across the industry. Scale of that type can't be ignored, and it represents a very interesting opportunity. I wanted to touch on an interesting point though. Facebook is causing somewhat of a disagreement within several organizations around the country. The problem is that Facebook is perceived as being a social environment, and there are several organizations we've talked to where the CMOs simply don't know whether the Facebook Exchange should be managed by their social team or whether it should be managed by their advertising teams. And in some cases, actually, they've got into the very unfortunate decision of being frozen by indecision and are actually now not doing anything on the Facebook Exchange at all. And I wanted to address this first of all and give you some input and guidance on this. You know, the Facebook Exchange is a display media buy, and as such it is very beneficial for you as an organization to have people who understand display media buying and its metrics managing this type of campaign. It is true that it is taking place within the social environment of Facebook, but that isn't actually the primary point in this case, and it should be managed, in our opinion, by the media team, but with the awareness and perhaps guidance and hand-holding of what your social team is doing within their efforts on Facebook. Now, if you think of the Facebook Exchange as simply another media source, then if we look at the Luma industry landscape, this is where it fits in. It is an ad exchange, and for those of you not familiar with the world of ad exchanges, I'm going to take a brief moment to explain those. The ad exchanges, think of them as pools of digital media that you can buy from. At the moment, when we're talking about ad exchanges, we're primarily talking about display media and we're talking about mobile. In the future, real-time exchanges for media will probably spread to a whole other variety of formats, including things like digital billboards. But today, certainly, we're going to be primarily talking about display media. The shift that media exchanges have had on our industry has been quite dramatic. We've gone from this situation of buying broad audiences based on a number of beliefs about that audience. So you could buy GQ.com, for instance, and say, well, this is a place where we can find males between the ages of 18 and 30. And you make an assessment about that site and decide how much of that overlaps with your existing audience. Well, with the exchanges, you're not buying broad audiences. You're actually targeting specific individuals. And as we'll go on and learn within the Facebook Exchange, you can choose which of those individuals to target based on very specific points of intent that they have. And so the way right now to think of the Facebook Exchange is as another media exchange source. Several clients have reached out and asked, should they treat it therefore as just another exchange and really not worry too much about it? Well, there's a lot that's very interesting and unique about the Facebook Exchange, particularly the price and the way it performs, which we'll touch on again towards the end of the presentation. And it means that for now, the recommendation is the Facebook Exchange is treated differently to other exchanges, but perhaps in a shorter period of time, as 6 to 18 months, then that recommendation may change as prices come into line and behaviors align, and actually then maybe the recommendation will be to treat it simply as another media exchange. Now, this world of exchanges can be a little bit confusing for some if you're not used to it, and so I like to use the analogy of the film The Matrix series. This particular screenshot is from the point in which the lead character Neo starts seeing the world as code for the first time, rather than seeing as an individual. And this is a useful thing of what we're talking about. Yes, when we're doing our marketing, we're always trying to find people that meet certain attributes, but we don't know who those people actually are. We just know points of data around them. And so what we're really looking for is certain cookie IDs or unique identifiers that help us know who to target, and then we're matching against that the data that we have access to decide the value that that individual has. And certainly this is not going ignored within the industry. This model was put together about 18 months ago and shows the rapid growth of real-time bidded media. Interestingly, it was put together, I believe, from by programmatic before the creation of the Facebook exchange. And so when we look at 2015 and say that the possible amount of digital media being bought through real-time is 50%, could actually be very different if the Facebook exchange takes off in the way that as an industry we believe it probably will. The real-time bidded world used to be the domain simply of direct response marketers. It was cheap inventory and allowed them to be very data-driven in their thinking. That's not the case anymore. A lot of our Chango clients are also now using us for branding and awareness campaigns, because what they've learned is that the exchanges aren't just remnant inventory, and that they can actually remove a lot of the inefficiencies from their branding and awareness campaigns by looking at the attributes that they have about specific individuals. So let's touch on an important point, this concept of, or this idea of the difference between marketplace ads and Facebook exchange. Marketplace ads have been around for several years and are a long-lasting product in the lifetime of Facebook. Marketplace ads are bought on a cost-per-click basis. You decide who to target based on data that Facebook provides to you. So this is the profile data that each of you have probably added to Facebook and is now, interestingly, starting to become exposed to you through their new graph search function. And if you haven't registered and tried playing with that yet, I certainly recommend you do. But Marketplace ads bought on a CPC, and it uses Facebook data. Typically, we find that marketplace ads are now owned by the search marketer within a brand or an agency as opposed to the display buyers. At the time when marketplace ads went from a CPM to a CPC model, I was running a media group at an agency, and we were quite happily ticking along growing our business on the display team running marketplace ads, and then it suddenly became more applicable for the search marketers to grab that space, and within a very short period of time a lot of that budget got moved over into the hands of the search marketers. And I think in many ways it makes sense, but it'll be interesting to see how the Facebook exchange starts to change that behavior in the marketplace ads. However, the Facebook exchange or FBX ads are very different. They're bought on what's called a second price dynamic CPM auction. For those of you familiar with AdWords, then you'll be familiar with this concept of a second price auction. It simply means that if 3 people are bidding for an impression, one at 30 cents, one at 40 cents, one at 50 cents, the person at 50 cents is going to win the impression, but they're not going to pay 50 cents, they're going to pay the second price that was bid. And so it's one of the fairest ways to create a dynamic auction environment and works very well within digital media. It's also in keeping with the way that the other exchanges typically work. The primary difference is Facebook does not give you any profile data to do targeting with. You're going in blind and just choosing who to buy based on the data that you take with you. And so that's why in a few moments we're going to spend a lot of time talking about data. At the moment, we're also seeing this being owned by the display buyer rather than by the search marketer, and that's an important change and shift. It means that it's going to get bought and sold through the same types of tools and partnerships that media planners already have. To an extent, you can do tracking with DoubleClick and Atlas, and we may answer some questions on that later. So it makes sense right now that the display buyer is owning that. So let's touch on data. Data seems to get a lot of marketers in a spin because depending on their individual background, they look at this in many different ways. If you're a big box retailer or a cataloger, then you tend to think of data as being big, cumbersome CRM type data. If you're a young media planner, then you tend to think of data as being first-party data, such as has somebody visited my site, or have they filled in a particular form, have they hit a pixel. The truth is, all of that is valuable data and all comes into play when we're thinking about any type of programmatic buying or Facebook exchange buying. And to give you a bit of a definition on this term that's become the big topic of 2013, big data, the easiest way to think of it is lots of data that's kind of cumbersome to use and is probably disparate across a number of sources. That's all people mean when they talk about big data. It's not one simple database where everything's neatly organized. It's lots of data about your consumers. And to that point, along with big data, the other big buzz phrase of 2013 that, if you haven't heard already, you're certainly going to hear a lot about, is this concept of programmatic marketing. What we mean by programmatic marketing is the ability to do something with that data. So big data is just lots of it and it's difficult to use. Programmatic marketing is the solution to that and brings all that together. And when we're thinking about data from your own site or third-party sources, when we're talking about doing programmatic buying to make maximum use of that. And so when we think about our solutions and what your possibilities are in FBX, then we come at this from 2 points of view. First of all, the most common data being used within FBX today, according to Facebook, is first-party retargeting data. Now, for some of you, it might seem a surprise that we refer to retargeting data as data, but it is, and it's data that you generate and you own. Somebody has visited one of your pages and left, and you now have that point of data about them. You know what they looked at, you know how long they spent, you know if they're an existing customer, etc. And so that is your first-party data. And it's the easiest to collect because all it requires is placing a pixel on your page, and then we can go into FBX for you, find those people again, and retarget them. And this is the reason why it's been the fastest growing source of campaigns within Facebook. However, Facebook is not just for retargeting like any other exchange, it's for all other types of marketing, including prospecting. We as an organization, for instance, as I touched on at the beginning, are best known for search retargeting. We're actually the second largest source of search data in the United States, Canada and the UK, only surpassed by Google. So we have more data than Yahoo and Bing every month combined going through our systems. And we use that search data to decide what individuals have value for our clients, and then we go find those individuals in Facebook. And so think of this for retargeting, but also think of this for prospecting. And that data changes the way we behave within these environments. Probably several of you on this call have already started to do some type of Facebook exchange buying, and you might be doing some simple retargeting right now. That retargeting is probably looking extremely attractive in comparison to anything else you're doing in marketing because the Facebook exchange inventory is so cheap right now. And it might mean that you haven't been putting a lot of effort into the ways in which you work and the ways in which you optimize those campaigns. Well, site retargeting is a little more complex, or can be, if you want to drive extra efficiency. And the way we refer to it is programmatic site retargeting. And if you remember back to our definitions, programmatic is the way to use lots of big data. Big data means that you know more about your individuals, and so therefore can determine true value of those individuals. So what we're talking about is going into the Facebook exchange to retarget your customers, but only finding those people that are likely to convert. Let me give you an example. If you're a luxury brand automaker, then one of the things you care about is somebody's credit rating or ability to be able to afford one of your cars. With a standard site retargeting idea, then somebody hits your car page, they leave, and then you can retarget them in Facebook. With an advanced retargeting solution, perhaps you even customize the ad to show them the exact model of car that perhaps they looked at. But when you're talking about a programmatic approach and you're starting to use a lot more data, in our case, the sort of data that we bring into the equation is that person at 2 in the morning last night searching for a credit card for people with bad debt? Why would you retarget that individual as the luxury car brand just because they visited your page? The other data is saying don't waste your money on this individual, they're not going to convert for you, or they're unlikely to convert for you. Another example, we work with a home improvements brand. If we have individuals arriving on their site on a Friday afternoon searching for the term new kitchen, that individual's probably going to make a $10,000 to $40,000 purchase decision in the next 72 hours over their weekend. We're going to bid very, very high on that person, and we're going to have a very high frequency cap to saturate their experience. However, if someone arrives on a Sunday morning searching for how to hang wallpaper, that person has probably already made their purchases, has little value to you, and so perhaps we bid 5–10 cents CPM across the regular exchanges, and if we find them, we find them. If we don't, we don't. We actually don't mind in that case because they don't have a lot of value to us. That is the difference between a programmatic approach. You're able to utilize a lot more data, make it actionable. And so when we talk about doing this in Facebook, we're talking about utilizing that amount of data to decide who we should truly target. And that data for prospecting obviously comes into play with the search retargeting idea. In this case, very simple example, someone searches for luxury family car on Google, Yahoo, or Bing. They have not visited your pages. We will go into the regular exchanges, or we will go into the Facebook exchange in this case, and we will target them with an ad specifically on your behalf. This is brand new people, and so therefore not only is there value in talking to them, but there's also value for attracting them as a new-to-file customer. And so to kind of summarize what we call programmatic FBX advertising, it's this idea of combining, in our case, lots of third-party data such as 300 million search profiles, but also any other third-party data sources that perhaps you might want to use, along with your own first-party data, which most commonly is site visitation data, but we're also importing massive retailer and travel organization CRM systems and using that data to make those sorts of decisions. So what are the early indicators like? Well, first of all, the CPMs are lower. Interestingly, over the last 6 weeks alone, we've started to see somewhat of a rise in the CPMs, and so I think as marketers, you have to be cautious and set the right expectation within your own organizations, or if you're dialing in from an agency, you have to set the right expectation with your own clients, that these CPM prices are going to creep up, and so I would be cautious about the ROI or CPA expectations you set today. But the good news is there is probably never going to be a cheaper time to jump into FBX, and it is the best time to get started. To think back to our animated character earlier, don't be frozen by indecision on this. Now is the opportunity. We're also seeing across campaigns that it usually takes less impressions being served on Facebook for somebody to convert than it would through a regular exchange buy. Those individuals tend to also convert quicker, and by that we mean the time between when they were exposed to the ad to when they actually went and converted is shorter than through a regular exchange. And we're also seeing significant uplift in the overall cost per acquisition by combining search data with FBX. Even when we're retargeting existing users, by using that search data to eliminate and chip away at the wastage from your audience, obviously will lead to a better overall ROI. And so, with 5 minutes to go here, I want to touch briefly on 5 key takeaways for you and then jump straight into some of the questions that have been popping up. And for those of you who dialed in just after the start, as a reminder, we're going to stay on the line and keep the conference open past the halfway mark, past the 30-minute mark. And you're welcome to stay on and ask questions and have a discussion, but otherwise feel free to jump off at the 30-minute point. So key takeaways. The easiest way to get started on Facebook Exchange is to start with retargeting. Get pixels on your site and allow us to find that audience again within the Facebook Exchange. To my earlier point, there's never been a cheaper time to do it, and so it's a great way to capitalize on it. Secondly, really important around site retargeting, invest the right amount, not as much as you can. And the reason why we say that is often we'll talk to CMOs and they'll talk about how they've been increasing their retargeting budget because the return on it is so good, and often at the detriment of other types of prospecting buys. That's not necessarily the smartest way to approach this. You should spend the amount you need to generate the number of conversions you can from your existing audience, and then use the rest of the budget that might be being wasted in retargeting by putting it into other prospecting methods. And sure, prospecting methods are not going to run at the same ROI as your retargeting. So if you're from an agency, this is a big conversation to re-educate your client, and if you're working on the client side, it's a big philosophy to get your heads around. But if you're starting to include measurement metrics such as new to file or cost of new customer, then actually it becomes a little bit clearer. To my earlier point, measurement is different. Because the price is lower, because the algorithms to optimize are different, the behavior of individuals is different, then you should, for the time being, treat the Facebook exchange as something different to the regular exchanges. The Facebook exchange, one of the reasons why the conversions are happening quicker and with less impressions is that when you are on Facebook, you're rarely trying to accomplish something. You're just, in many ways, killing time, and so you're more likely to be exposed to the ads and notice them and therefore be influenced to take action. The other thing, of course, about the Facebook exchange ads is that they look different. It's the ads down the right-hand side that you'll all be familiar with from using Facebook. And you don't suffer from this concept of banner blindness. Banner blindness, a usability term that refers to the fact that mentally you know the shape of an MPU, a kind of square 300 by 250 ad, or a skyscraper down the right-hand side, and your brain has a tendency to block some of those ads out automatically. The Facebook exchange ad format is new and different and fresh, and so therefore it's another reason why you're likely to be influenced. Fourthly, certainly use FBX for more than retargeting. Use it for prospecting. And it's a very efficient way to use it for prospecting, particularly when combining our unique source of search data, because you can really hone in on the individuals most likely to convert. And of course, fifth, feel free to give us a call. There is an important point to make about the way we operate that's very different to many other organizations in this industry. On the back end, we're a technology company, and all of the technology we use for our data management and media buying is all of our own, as opposed to piggybacking on something third party. And that means that we can be a lot more granular and bring things to our customers a lot quicker than others can. But aside from the technology, we operate where we have a new business team, obviously, and many of you will have had conversations with that team. We have an ad ops team who are doing daily optimization on your behalf if you're a full service customer, giving you help and guidance if you're one of our platform partners. But most importantly, we then have a separate and dedicated client services team that are either all agency individuals or they're real marketers. And they are not incentivized by how much you spend with Chango. They're incentivized by the overall successful strategy on your account and your success. And it's one of the reasons why we have more than a 90% conversion rate. 90% retention rate. Final slide before I jump into questions. There are plenty of resources available to you on Chango.com. Visit Chango.com/resources. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and that's a great way to get access to our materials. The white paper on here that's of particular interest, it seems, looking at the numbers to most people, is this concept of view-through. And so it's an ideal time to address two of the questions that have come in around can you measure view-through through the Facebook exchange. The simple answer is you can measure it, but you're not going to get all the same type of data that perhaps you're used to. For those of you, first of all, not familiar with the concept of view-through, it's when an individual is exposed to your digital ad, does not click, but still goes on to convert. Another way to think of what view-through is it's the effect of exposing somebody to a campaign, more like a billboard rather than a search ad. View-through can be measured by correlating a pixel or cookie that's dropped on an individual and seeing if they were exposed to the ad and did they then go on and convert. Typically, you will measure view-through by using an ad server built into a company like Chango, or you will use a third-party tool like a DoubleClick or an Atlas. Facebook do allow you to use DoubleClick and Atlas, but what's different is, unlike any other type of exchange buy, you can't serve the ads through DoubleClick or Atlas. You can only use the conversion pixel. So when you look in your reporting, you won't see any impression or click level data, but you will see conversions broken down by post-click and post-view. As Chango, if you're running your campaigns through us, we will then give you that impression and click data separately, but you won't be able to access those through your third-party ad. So the next question we have here is, how is Facebook integrating third-party data? Well, Facebook Exchange itself is not integrating third-party data. When you buy on Facebook Exchange, you have to utilize all of your own data, whether it be first-party or whether it be third-party. When we run our campaigns, then the data that is third-party to our clients is our proprietary search data, second largest source of search data in the US, UK, Canada, and we use that within our bid logic or our decisioning engine to decide who to target and what that person is worth to us. We can also bring in other third-party data for you, such as the Blue Kais and the XLAs of the world, as well as any other data sources that you have access to as an organization. Correlated question to that from Carlos. How do you gather search data from Google? Well, the way we gather search data from Google, Yahoo, and Bing is primarily what we call referrer data. When you click on a SEM or an SEO link and visit a site, that site can see that you came in from a search engine and it can see the search term that you used. We have, over the last 4 years, built up a significant network of sites, publishers, content owners, etc., that carry our code and are compensated by us for carrying that code. And whenever those sites see that incoming search data, then we capture that. It means that we have the most real, most fresh, most scalable source of search data, because it's not made up search data, for want of a better phrase. This is searches that are taking place. We use that search data then across regular exchange buys and also across the Facebook exchange. Ara, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Question is, missed the first example of programmatic FBX site retargeting. Can you give her another example of how this works and differs from regular first-party site retargeting? Sure. In its general sense, Ara, then what we're talking about with programmatic site retargeting is being able to use more data. And with more data, you can make better decisions. Programmatic site retargeting isn't for everybody. It's for those organizations who feel as though they have data that can add value to their programs and decisions. And so there are many ways in order to do this. It could be, for instance, that you have a simple flag you pass to us through a pixel that we place on the site that says, for instance, is this person an existing customer of yours or not? It could be, have they looked at a certain amount of content on a certain day of the week, for instance. Whatever information is valid to you and your organization, that can be passed to us through that cookie. However, it can also be passed to us through a back-end synchronization, and we can do what's called a cookie match and pass in as much data as you would like to. We actually have one partner who's passing us over 5,500 pieces of data almost a second about their audience, and then that data is used in that decisioning. Ara also asked for another example. For one of the luxury car brands we work with, we actually use some of that data in a programmatic capability to exclude the people who we think are young children who are looking at the sports cars and have an aspiration to have one. It's great that they want to be involved and this brand wants to have them engaged, but they don't want to retarget those individuals, and so we look at other behaviors and third-party data to determine whether they're valid in this scenario, and if they're not, we exclude them from that retargeting pool. Anurag's question, technically, how do I sync my cookie or internal data with your system? Well, as we touched on in the last question, there's a number of ways in which you can do this. You can do it very simply through the cookie being placed on your site, and we can give you some variables and fields where you can pass in the important data. If you have a lot of data to pass to us, and we're quite used to dealing with lots of data, then we can do a back-end cookie match situation. If you want to reach out to me, dax@chango.com, I'm happy to give you more information on that and describe how that process could operate. Next question from Matt. What is the average ramp-up time needed to collect enough data from your pixel to start being able to have the effect of the programmable data start to take effect? It is a good question. There isn't a definitive answer to this, Matt. It does depend on your type of business, whether you're a long consideration or a short consideration cycle. Some of the data you could use in a programmable manner is search data, for instance, that we already have, and so there is no ramp-up period in that case. If you came to us as a credit card brand, for instance, we could immediately exclude all of those people who are out searching for things that indicate they have a very bad debt credit situation and could start excluding those. Typically, I would say if you want to start syncing as your data to use in that programmable fashion, then we usually find on our end we go through a 48-hour technical and QA process, and are usually then only limited in time by the speed of your own teams in order to get that integrated. And then, as I say, depending on who your audience is and what data you have, it could be as short as a week or so's worth of data before you start to see efficiencies that really make a difference. And some of those efficiencies, to address Sarah's question there, aren't necessarily about getting a lower CPM or getting a constantly lower and lower cost per acquisition. It could be, for instance, that if you have an individual who is expressing all of the right intent to make a very large purchase, why try and force down the CPM? Why not drive up the CPM to make sure you get that individual and get them through to your conversion point? As long as the overall return from your campaigns is increasing, then CPM and CPA on their own don't necessarily become valid metrics. We have a question here from Claire where asking about the format of FBX ads and what you need. I suggest logging into your Facebook account and having a look down the right-hand side, but in short, it's an image and it's some text, so it's very different to a lot of other exchange board media that you might be used to. We recognize that many of our marketers don't have access to FBX Creative today, and so as part of our full-service solution, we will include Facebook Creative for you in order to help you get started. Unlike most other digital media campaigns, then it pays to have lots of creative versions and keep things fresh in order to continue to drive up those conversions. Mark, great question. Can you download the presentation? Yes, we'll be sending out a follow-up with a survey and also a link where you can download this presentation. You can also reach out to us with any other questions. Anurag, to your question about working with that specific team, absolutely. Feel free to drop me a line and we will happily look at that for you. Andrea, great question. So Andrea's question is this running with Boolean logic rules, etc.? Yes, one of the things about doing programmatic marketing, and if you do a Google search for programmatic marketing, you'll see a lot of our materials out there from Chango on this topic, is that it is Boolean logic, but taken to the next level. You have full Boolean capabilities in order to do either prospecting or retargeting, which is very important. But we can also help you in other ways to help you understand how to get the most value from your data. It is more labor intensive than you might potentially be more used to, but our client services and strategy teams take that load on for you. And what I mean by that is that they will sit down and work through our kind of playbook, if you will, of all of the various ways in which we've learned to garner efficiency from your data set and your campaigns, and we'll hold your hand through that whole process. And it looks like that is the last of our questions that have come in through the chat interface. As I say, we're going to send out a link to you so you can download this presentation. There will be a recording as well as the presentation itself. My email address is dax@chango.com. You can also reach the team at sales@chango.com. Feel free to reach out with any sort of questions, comments, feedback, etc. One last reminder, we are running a further webinar on this topic for clients, which is a private webinar as part of our client learning series, so feel free to reach out to your representative at Chango. But otherwise, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate you giving us your time, and hopefully this has been useful, and hopefully we'll see you again on the next of our mini webinar series.
Thank you. Please stand by.